The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Blanchard System monthly webinar for Dalim tips and tricks. My name is Mike Moscato and I'm going to do the presentation today. What we're going to cover today is an ES topic. This is how to work with taxonomies and facets in ES. Facets, I've heard it pronounced both ways. Facets sounds more French and sophisticated, so we'll go with that. And we're going to cover how to do searching, organizing, and do some tagging using taxonomies and facets. Now, as always, when we start one of these broadcasts, we want to do some of the housekeeping, and I went too far. In your GoToWebinar app, if the screen is a little too big or too small, you've always got that option up in the top left-hand corner to zoom it or use a different zoom factor to fit on your screen. You should have a Ask Questions field in the GoToMeeting control panel if you want to drop questions. If it's something really urgent, one of the guys might see it and will stop me from rambling and I can answer it, but we usually will answer them at the end. And with that, let's get started. Now, first of all, if you were on last month's webinar, you saw Alex go over a lot of the different metadata types that are defined in ES. Taxonomy being one of these, and this is one that it's kind of hard to just gloss over in a few minutes. You can say, you know, this thing is for taxonomies, but what is it, right? So we want to take a deep dive into this metadata type and show how it can be used in ES. Facets is a way that when we work with taxonomies, we can narrow searches and look for files or objects that share common attributes. We'll see later how you actually configure those and assign them in ES so someone can see them and work with them. And at the end of the day, what this is used for is for searching and finding objects that, as you can see, share similar attributes or are all common residents of the same tree, if that means anything. The whole term taxonomy, you know, you might be familiar with it from your high school biology class, right? When you saw how perhaps animals are classified, you know, through this whole structure working from very general to narrower to narrower to narrower. So it's just a way to group different objects within a specific type of structure. Now, I read all that myself and I go, what does that even mean? Because if you're used to working in ES, you know, everything I just said might still sound like a bunch of nebulous gobbledygook. So before we do any more splaining, I'm going to jump into ES and we're going to work through, or we're going to look at this project I was working on a few months ago. And after we go through it, maybe you'll have a better idea of how this works and what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go right to the search field in ES. And what I was working on a few months ago was this thing that had to do with the Kennedy Space Center and a lot of NASA photos. So you can see I have a taxonomy here called NASA projects. And when I clicked it, you see a whole bunch of files popped up here. The reason they all came up is these all share one common metadata attribute. They all live under that tree. So, you know, I'm searching around and I want to find information related to this. So, you know, maybe I want to go old school. I want to look at the Mercury program. So this just narrowed my search down. So this is every file I have in here that's related to the Mercury program. If I expand, I could get to a specific flight if I wanted to. Maybe I wanted to see something related to Freedom 7. So those are the only two images I have for that. But I want to look at the whole thing. And I should have stayed there. There we go. If I click this tab called Facets, this is the way we now narrow our search down even further. And I should have stayed on the Mercury project, so let's go back there. One place to keep your eye on is under the search field up here in the top left. Watch these little breadcrumbs that pop up, because those are, if you ever kind of get lost and you're not sure what you're looking at, those show what you're filtering through. So I've got a bunch of different type of attributes. Let's say I want to see every Mercury flight, and I want to see launches. So there's 3 photos of launches. And you'll notice as certain of these are clicked, you'll see the information change in some of these other attributes. So if I turn that off, notice there's several astronauts, right, that have photos in here for the Mercury program. As soon as I click launch, we see there's only a couple of them. Now, if you know your space history, you know that Alan Shepard was actually the first American in space. Everybody thinks it's John Glenn. So I say, I want to see some Alan Shepard info. So what am I filtering on now? Mercury program, Alan Shepard launch. I only got one of them, him launching. So let's say I don't want to see anything launch related. So now I have everything related to Alan Shepard and the Mercury program. So if you know your NASA history, he's that guy that hit the golf ball on the moon. So I'm going to think maybe I got some Alan Shepard related to the Apollo program, because that's the moon stuff. There it is. Now I got some Apollo. And I don't really care about his Mercury stuff, so let's get rid of that. If I go further, you'll notice when I selected Alan Shepard, I have these different locales here. So these are 3 shots of him where? On the lunar surface. So let's click that. I'm still restricted to Shepard and lunar surface, but I want to see everything on the lunar surface, not just Alan Shepard. Turn it off. Everything related to Apollo that's on the lunar surface. Notice when I make it more open-ended, it shows me different tags related to being on the lunar surface, and these are different people associated with it. Let's say Gene Cernan. Again, I know my NASA stuff, so I know Gene Cernan was also in the Gemini program. So if I turn these filters off, I get extra shots of him. There he is doing a spacewalk on the Gemini program. So I think you can see what I'm working with here. I think one of the good points to make, at least I like it, is I just did a whole bunch of searching and I never touched the keyboard. I never had to type in a file name. I didn't type in any customers or projects or folders. Everything was based on metadata that was tagged in these files. And just one quick look at some of the stuff. I'll just pick one of these at random. This guy, here's his metadata, and this reflects his taxonomy. These are those facets or the attributes that we use to narrow down. That's the astronaut, that's where he is. So now that we've gone over that, we may want to take a quick time out. And what I want to do is I want to do some shopping. So I want to go to Best Buy because I like electronics. I'm going to go to the Products tab. And actually, my electronics gear is fine, but I need to look at some appliances because I want to get a new refrigerator. So let's check the refrigerators. And we want to look at all the refrigerators. And now I say, I want to look at Whirlpool. And, anybody who knows me knows I'm very frugal, so I only want Whirlpools that are between $250 and $500. And I like this color, the bisque or biscuit color. So if you look at what I'm doing, I think you can see that this is essentially the same kind of thing I was just doing in ES. The notion of filtering data and filtering your assets through taxonomies and facets is certainly nothing that's unique to ES. I mean, this in terms of how retail sites like Amazon or Best Buy categorize all this stuff, it's basically the same thing. And these guys here, these are the facets. Remember I was talking about keeping your eye up here in ES in this little top left-hand corner. It's the same thing here. So this is our overall tree, and these are the facets. Now that is one heck of a refrigerator, so I'm going to put it in my cart, and I'll come back and purchase that later on. But let's go back into ES now, and let's get a little more information on what it is I'm talking about here with taxonomies. I'm very bad at Keynote. So let's jump to the next slide. Now, what you're looking at here is very wordy, but this is some very top-level stuff in terms of what taxonomies are. The main thing to keep in mind is it's a hierarchy or a structure for grouping. And as you saw, you really want to be able to tag and index and categorize all this stuff with metadata, which we're doing in ES. And obviously, it allows us to search on that information. And most people, you can take it to the bank that I didn't suddenly grow a new brain. So this is a website I got a lot of this information from. So this is probably more information than you would need to know, but it's still kind of a good introduction into what taxonomies are and how they work. So let's look at how this stuff actually showed up in my interface. How was this put together? Because you'll see that it's pretty detailed in terms of how this is structured and how we can filter on specific information. For instance, that's everything at Apollo 14. Let's go into our metadata sets. And I have one specifically for those goodies we were just looking at. This is the taxonomy we've been seeing. And within your metadata sets, you have to create a property with the type taxonomy. If I start expanding this, you see that's all that stuff that was in the taxonomy tree that we were working with. And so you'll ask yourself, well, how do you put that stuff together? How do you make one of these? So I'm going to try to very quickly go through an example. Now, if you decide to take the plunge and do something like this, you have to be pretty careful planning ahead of time how all your information is structured. And, the fact is, I have to think that for some of our ES users, this may not be applicable, maybe in terms of how the type of assets you have and how you manage them, they may not necessarily lend themselves to being categorized in this way. But if they are, it's a very powerful search tool, I think you've already seen. So here's Mike's department store, right? Now, I'm not going to get into too many details on it, but the fact is my department store would just have, two trees. There would be T-shirts and boxer shorts, and that's it. But if you were presented with a tree like this, and, you had decided this is how our information is organized, how would you build that in the interface? So I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to do most of it. We don't want to spend all day watching me do this stuff, but let's kind of scrunch that over and keep this over to the side so I can kind of reference it as I build this guy. So I've got a metadata set here, this guy who's basically empty right now. He's got nothing in him. And I'm going to make a new property. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, we'll call it MDS, Mike's Department Store. As soon as I say it's going to be a taxonomy, it presents me with this little start field. And if I click on that, I'm just going to give that, that's going to be my top level guy. He's kind of like that top guy there, MSD. What do we see? From here, there's two sub headings. If I click and say add child node, we'll call that sub 1. Click it again, add a child node, sub 2. So what have I just done? I've done these two guys here. What do we know about this sub 1? He has his own category or subcategory. So I click him, add child node. What did I call it? Sub 11. What do we know? We don't care about typos. About him, he's got two forks on him. So those are two child nodes, and we'll call it 1, and we'll call it 2. So we've just done everything from there down to there. And I won't bore you with all the details, but we'll just do a couple more. What do we know about sub 2? He's got two subcategories, or in ES parlance, child nodes. Call him sub 22. Do another one, sub 23. And that guy's got 5. I'll just pop those in and we'll call it a day. A, B, C, E, F, G. In fact, I don't think we'll do 5 because after a while, I think it becomes pretty obvious what I'm doing here. So there it is. That's the Mike's Department Store is ready and open for business. Let's save it. So let's say I was dumping some assets in there and I was tagging them with my new sweaters and underwear and t-shirts. I go into the search field to search on the taxonomies and I look and I go, what the heck? Where is Mike's Department Store? I don't see it listed under my list of taxonomies. This is where you have to keep in mind how we present things and make things available in ES. I'm going to go to my user profile here. If you go into your search settings, you have this option called Manage Taxonomies. And notice my profile is not set to present Mike's Department Store. Let's add it. Let's say OK. Let's save it. And with most things user profile related, I have to log out and log in, sign in, go to our taxonomies. There's Mike's Department Store. Now, I don't have anything tagged with that right now. And as you probably know, if I do want to start tagging things with it, I'd have to add a job ticket that works with that stuff. I haven't done that yet, but I do have a bunch of untagged files in here. And let's look at how all that stuff reacts real quick. Let's go to, I got all my stuff in the file system. And I got a folder in here called Untagged. So let's go to, there's a bunch of Best Buy stuff I was messing around with before. Let's go to the properties for these headphones. He's not a spaceship. He's audio gear. He's not a speaker, but I'm pretty sure I defined this metadata set as the option called open choice. So I can say he's headphones. At least I think I did. Nah, he must be an enumeration. So we'll say he's a very small speaker. What's his price? He's been not the 80 and 99 bucks. What is he? He's white. What is he? He's Apple's earpod guys. Go to taxonomy. Search on Best Buy products. Search for only things that are white. There's our headphones. So as you look at this stuff, I think especially if you look at all this space stuff that I have in here, you might think to yourself, that stuff is very well organized. He's got all the different programs and all the different flights, well organized. But the fact is, nothing could be further from the truth, because every one of those files is just dumped in one folder. I just threw them all in here. And the names are just a complete mishmash of nonsense, because I got these files from all over the place. So, some of them, have utterly meaningless names, and some of them you could probably read them, but, they're still in no particular format. And as you saw, I wasn't searching on names. But the fact is, especially if you're working on the file system, there's going to be the case where people are going to want to be able to just browse a folder and find the stuff they want. At least I think that's what people want to do. And I'm going to mount a share to that server. And this is basically the file system in ES. So, if I'm looking through here to find my stuff, I'm going to give up. It's too messy. So here's the point I want to make. Let's do a search. Let's search for everything that's related to Apollo 14. And I want you to pay attention to what we see in the Smart View here. Notice where it says NASA projects, Apollo 14. In fact, let's just expand the metadata over here on the side. And I'm actually going to make a point here. Notice the taxonomy shows to us, it looks like a path. It looks like a folder is what it looks like. So it would be useful, one might think, to utilize the metadata to build a folder structure so we can automatically organize all this stuff for ourselves. For instance, let's just take this one, take this file. These happen to be in a workflow where as soon as I approve it, it's going to kick it forward. And it's going to do some ES stuff. So if we watch in my mounted volume, I don't know, what did I do with that thing? Oh, there we go. I'm going to back up. And I'm going to go into NASA projects. I'm going to go to an Apollo. I'm going to go into Apollo 14 and notice it created that folder for me and it dumped my file in it. Let's grab a few of them. Let's get 4 of these guys. There's no reason, the more the merrier. We don't need that. So if I'm watching, again, my folder structure, the Apollo 14 stuff, here they are showing up. Notice those went into a photos folder. Those were brought into the system when the workflow had a slightly different mojo in it. But the point I want to make is we are building the folder structure based on the taxonomy metadata. And again, just to make another example, notice that, let's see, which Apollo program don't we have anything in here for? There's Apollo 1, all right? That guy. Is there anything in Apollo 1 here? No, there's not. Select him, approve him. There it is. So we build the folder structure from the metadata. And since that's the ES file system, I can go to NASA projects, Apollo 1. I'm not sure if that guy put it in the photos folder. I don't think it did. And my file monitor looks like it's kind of lagging behind here today. It's always good. Let's look, though, at how that was actually accomplished. Let's go back to our ingest folder, and we'll pick any file. If we do a show workflow on it. This is the link these things hit after they're approved. And this is actually a pretty simple routine we ran. The stuff at the bottom you can ignore. This had to do with some sorting I was doing earlier where I was putting photos in one folder, videos, documents. This is the only thing that we're really interested in here. What we're doing is we're defining a variable based on the taxonomy information, which we know is in the form of what we would think of as a folder path. And you'll notice I got a couple in here because I was dealing with that space stuff and I was dealing with this Best Buy stuff. But once it defines that path, we're just making a metadata value out of it, which we call path. And that's then used in a digital delivery step. Got the step called move to project, and if you've ever done this stuff before, you know that in a digital delivery step, move to project, you can call metadata. So this calls the path that was created from the taxonomy information, creates that path on the file system, and it builds all those goodies for me. So taxonomy metadata was passed as a metadata value to a digital delivery step, which created the folder paths for us. But you know, that's useful and interesting, but it'd be nice to flip the script a bit. Because the way all this information got in here, all of this stuff, is I put it all in manually. So I went in and I tagged it. You know, I said it's Apollo and it's Apollo, whatever the heck it is. Well, Apollo 11, we'll say that's what he is. So you can guess, who wants to do that all day? Wouldn't it be more useful or interesting if you could just get it to automatically tag information for you? Now, I'm hopeful that my file monitor is just not gone to sleep here. Let's see if he's behaving. Yeah, he is. Good. So I'm just going to we'll pick a folder at random. One of these guys I have in here. Let's say Gemini 5, we'll say. And I'm going to just grab some random images. I got all sorts of nonsense floating around here. Here we go. We might as well do some space stuff. Now, this one happens. What is this guy? Oh, okay, this is some Best Buy stuff. So what? Doesn't matter. We're going to copy it. I'm just going to throw it into the folder. Because what we saw just a second ago is we used the metadata to build the file system structure. But instead, let's make the file system build the metadata for us. So let's go into Gemini. Let's go into Gemini 5. Look at that. They had laptops with them. But notice in the Smart View, notice that path. That is not the folder path. That is the taxonomy, metadata. So from throwing the file into that path, we then had the path build the metadata. And again, just to prove that, you know, that's really what happened, I should be able to search on Gemini 5 now and find me some laptops. And I did. There they are. So, okay, How did we do that? Again, it's just some, and again, the thing to remember about the taxonomy stuff is it's just metadata. So we can manipulate it, like we do, any other metadata that we do in ES. But again, the big thing to remember is the form that it takes, that it, that is that path that's reflecting, this hierarchy or tree. But you can see it lets us do some cool stuff. Show workflow. There we go. So this is the workflow that was attached to that folder on the file system. File came in. And this one has some decision making to do because, again, since I got that Best Buy taxonomy and the NASA one, it had to figure out which way to go. So it went this way. And this was actually a pretty simple one because what we do is we already know that that file is sitting in a folder. As soon as ES, it's dropped in that folder on the file system and ES picks it up, there's a folder piece of metadata. And so based on where it is, this is basically the name of the ES volume. This is an ES file system. So we don't need him. In fact, we want to filter him out. So from that folder piece of metadata, we ignore him and we take everything out. This is a replace all routine in Java. And it's kind of like if you use Dalim's twist, it's kind of like doing a regular expression. And what I did then is I took that variable, which is created from my folder path, and I wrote it into the taxonomy. Page order, that's the name of my metadata set. That's the name of the taxonomy. This is some nonsense I had in there from before. I don't even know what that is. But you can see that from the folder path, we write the metadata. And actually, one other thing to show on that, I should have stayed in here. We do a show context. That's the folder piece of metadata that we pulled that information from. So I would hope, or I think you should see the advantages of searching with taxonomies and facets. That is, if your assets lend themselves to it. It's very, very important, though, that if you're going to work with these, to kind of sit down beforehand and map out how you're going to do it. Because a key concept, I think, to keep in mind is how you differentiate between what's going to be in that taxonomy tree and what's going to be considered a facet. Because, we know that very, very specific terms like car or shirt or pants, those are something that you're probably going to want to live in, the actual tree here, probably, if you're doing some sort of retail site. But when you get into things like colors, right, or brands, things like that, those are quite obviously, a spaceship could be black and a pair of pants could be black. So those are attributes that can be shared among multiple types of objects. But, even, after I went back and looked through, I had set this thing up. I kind of question some of the decisions I made. There's sometimes you get things that can go one way or the other. And so you can always back out afterwards, but you do have to be kind of careful how you put it all together. One final comment I want to make about the facets, right? The attributes that you use to narrow things down. The stuff that you've seen me messing around with today, and we'll just go into that space stuff. for things like the astronauts, which can have multiple values, right? You want to use something like this sequence option because there's a whole bunch of astronauts and there are many of the assets in here in which you'll have more than one of those guys associated with it. So, if you're going in here and, I'm going to maybe tag some more of this stuff. They got a whole bunch of untagged stuff up here. Yeah, now let's just, for the sake of it, let's say that there were several, let's say somebody else was in the photo. Let's say this guy. And let's say there was a guy in it who's not in my list. I go, oh, what the heck, I didn't have Jude Oliver in here, who is definitely an astronaut. Notice, this is what I was trying to do earlier. This is that metadata type that's called open choice. And I think Alex covered this last time, in which you can present a list of preset items, but if it's not in the list, you can still add it. So we'll put Fred in there too. And although it doesn't exist in the predefined piece of metadata, if I do searching now, let's see, let's say NASA, and let's say an Earth orbit. And if I see astronauts in Earth orbit, there's Fred, and there's Jude. So you don't necessarily have to have all of those guys predefined if you use the right metadata type. The one I was playing with earlier, I think I had defined as an enumeration, and an enumeration is a static list that won't let you add anything to it. Like this guy, this is like my, you saw the stuff like the different craft. If I, suddenly came across something and it was the cage that held the monkey in the first Mercury flight. Well, I don't have monkey cage in here, so I would have had to change this to an open choice option to be able to do something like that. And, they could be a string, they could be anything. But lastly, I should have mentioned, don't think I did, just as you control which taxonomies appear through your user profile, the facets also are controlled in that way. I think I got Chrome open here. Yeah, notice I've got Chrome open to a different user profile. I don't see any of that NASA stuff. All I see is Best Buy, and I don't see any of that astronaut spaceship stuff here because, as you just saw, I have it set up only to display these facets and the Best Buy taxonomy. I'm not sure if we have any questions. Let me look at my little GoToMeeting thing here. Oh, all right. I'll tell you what. Okay, here we go. What file types does ES support? Yikes. Let's see. PDF, TIFF, video files, document files, JPEGs, about every image file format you can think of. I did have videos in here previously for all that NASA stuff, but I'm not sure where it went to. 3D files. If you can think of a file, we probably support it. Okay. Is there a limit on the number of files you can use for these facets? At what point does it start to slow the system down? Well, there's only so many NASA images I could put on here. I don't honestly know the answer to that. A thing to remember is that, ES's searching and indexing is a very robust solution. And I'm talking about the Elasticsearch. All the indexing and searching is technically not done by ES, it's done by Elasticsearch. But One thing that I think is a good point to make, though, and this is something I brought up with Dalim recently, is it's not necessarily a limitation on the number of files or facets, but I do find it a bit annoying the way the interface is presented to us. Because you can see, I got me a lot of astronauts, and I could probably get me some more in there. And the fact that this thing presents itself only vertically. I can always collapse these things if I want to, but I really think that, especially the facets, I think needs to be redesigned so it can have maybe more of a useful use of the real estate that we have in here. Uh, Taxonomies. One of the things I did read about building taxonomies is, generally speaking, it's not a good idea to go more than 3 or 4 levels deep. If you go too deep, you have perhaps overthought it, and if you had something 5, 6 levels deep, you're probably at the point where you should have put that thing in as a facet or as an attribute. Well, there might be more questions. This thing scrolls down further. Holy cow. How do you correct a miscategorized image, as in the metadata has a typo or incorrect info? Well, I would just go retag it and fix it. Although one thing that I was trying to get sorted out myself that I couldn't figure out was something like this. Because I think this is something we should be able to get to work. This is one of the ones I just kind of threw in the folder, and it set the taxonomy for me. Fair enough. But let's say I say, holy cow, the guy threw it in the wrong folder. He threw this in the Apollo 1 folder. This is, Apollo 9, let's say, right? When I change that, where's my OK button? Yeah, when I change that, frankly, I think I should be able to say, once you change that guy, move him to the right folder. Now, that's something we should be able to get to work with a trigger. I haven't got it to work yet. The other way you would think we could get something like that to work would be maybe something like this. Let's say I was in here, and they said, oh, man, that's some guy says that's Apollo 11. That's Apollo 14. So let's say I throw it into Apollo 14. Well, it'll move it, but it won't retag it. And for me, that's a problem because, again, there should be a trigger action, I think, that will allow you to move something. If you just drag it to another folder, there should be some sort of trigger routine that will allow me to trigger a workflow that'll update the metadata for me. I think those are some things that we maybe need to get some fixes or some updates from Dalim. Maximum depth for taxonomy, I just said that. How can this be used with machine learning as shown at Duo? That's a good one. If you were at Duo, you saw Jacques Thibault from Dalim present his very interesting machine learning thing, which is essentially the Google Analytics, where it'll look at an image and tag it with all the different attributes it sees in it. It's a green tree with a frog on a sunny day, that kind of thing. This should work with that as long as I'm pretty sure that stuff gets written as a subject, but it's possible. We're going to have to find out. It would be preferable if you could have your own specific metadata property you write it to, and then have that be a facet in your search field. I think that'd be great. Can you embed metadata directly into the Adobe Xmp panel for use outside of ES, i.e. Bridge? Well, one thing to keep in mind, especially if you are working in ES in the file system, as long as your file system volume is set up with that little goodie there, everything I've done has inserted or injected that metadata into the file. So as long as, and the question was an Adobe Xmp panel, as long as I have that panel defined in ES under my metadata sets, because you basically you're going to have whatever the namespace of that metadata set is, and whatever properties may be associated with it. When I tag it, it's going to write it into the file, and I should be able to view that metadata when I go back over to Bridge. Should be a simple thing to experiment with. I think those are all of the questions. I hope I answered them. And there's just a couple thoughts I wanted to end on here. Number one, the metadata information that or taxonomy stuff. This is the person I mentioned earlier, and again, she is a taxonomist and an indexing expert. So she wrote a book called The Accidental Taxonomist. Probably more information than we ever want to know, but I think if you want to do a deep dive into that sort of stuff, that's a pretty good book to read. Next, hey, if you want to see some NASA and moon stuff, because I kind of get nostalgic looking at all this stuff, that's a really cool book. A lot of photography from the guys on the moon. So if you get worn out from setting up metadata and ES workflows, you should check out those books. Those are both on Amazon. And lastly, from looking at all this NASA stuff, I thought this was a fantastic quote from Alan Shepard. Somebody asked him what he thought about while he was inside the capsule when he was getting ready to lift off. And I think this is a classic response. The fact that every part of the ship was built by the lowest bidder. Now that's a comforting thought, I have to think. And I think that's what we'll leave you with is that lowest bidder quote. Third Wednesday of every month, Blanchard Systems, Dalim webinars, tips and tricks, more than you ever wanted to know. So that means the next one this is July. I guess that means August. And whatever the third Wednesday is, be ready. And I'm sure we'll have something interesting, although I have no idea what it is. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.